Emily just wanted to share her love of books with the neighborhood, so she built a tiny free library in her front yard. But the HOA said it violated property aesthetics and had to go. Instead of backing down, Emily turned her yard into a community hub with benches, book swaps, and poetry readings. What started as a small act of kindness sparked a battle that would change the neighborhood forever. It started with a single box of books. Emily Dawson, a 34-year-old freelance writer, had just moved into Crestview Pines, an HOA-managed suburb where every lawn looked airbrushed and every mailbox matched. Emily was quiet, polite, and admittedly a bit of a book nerd. She missed the spontaneous joy of city life, the book swaps at corner cafes, the tiny poetry readings at coffee shops. Her new neighborhood, though safe and quiet, felt ... sterile. So one weekend, Emily got creative. She built a little free library, a charming wooden box with a glass door, mounted on a short post at the edge of her yard. She painted it pastel blue, decorated it with tiny hand-drawn vines, and filled it with a handful of her favorite paperbacks. A simple sign read, "Take a book, leave a book. Stories are meant to be shared." At first, nothing happened. Then, a week later, a copy of Charlotte's Web appeared. Then, To Kill a Mockingbird. Someone added a Harry Potter novel. Kids started stopping by after school, their faces lighting up as they opened the tiny door. Emily began restocking books weekly. Then came the letter. HOA official notice. Unauthorized structure. Remove immediately. Apparently, her little library violated Section 3.9 of the Community Design Standards. No personal installations that disrupt the visual uniformity of front-facing lots. Emily stared at the letter for a long time. Her little box of stories was now a threat. That evening, she posted about it in the neighborhood Facebook group. Wasn't expecting my tiny library to be such a big issue. Anyone else thinks sharing books is a bad thing. Within hours, the post had 87 comments. Some people defended her. My daughter loves picking a new bedtime book from there. Honestly, that library makes our street feel more alive. Others, not so much. Rules are rules. If everyone starts decorating their lawns, this place will look like a flea market. What's next? A goat petting zoo. Emily replied politely. She wasn't trying to rebel. She just wanted to share joy, but the HOA wasn't moved. They gave her 5 days to remove the structure or face daily fines. Emily considered giving in. She wasn't a fighter. She hated conflict. But then, something changed. The next morning, she found a folded piece of paper tucked into the library door. In messy crayon handwriting, it read, "I love your little library. Please don't take it away." Maddie, age 7 inches, that did it. Emily dug out her old journal, opened her laptop, and began to plan something bigger. Emily Dawson wasn't a rebel. She preferred poetry to politics, T2 tequila, and journaling over jousting with authority. But when the HOA tried to shut down her little free library and when a 7-year-old girl begged her not to take it away, something inside her shifted. She wouldn't go quietly. The very next morning, Emily upgraded the library. She reinforced the post with weather-treated wood, added a new shelf for children's books, and built a small bench next to it using upcycled pallet wood. She added a new sign, "Stories build communities. Please read, share, and respect." She wasn't being aggressive. She was being visible. It didn't take long for the HOA to notice. On Tuesday, she received a second letter. This one was longer, sharper. It accused her of willful disregard for community standards and stated she would now be fined $100 per day until the unauthorized installation was removed. The letter ended with a bold line. "Failure to comply may result in legal escalation, including a lien against your property." Emily read it twice. Then she pinned it to the inside of the library door for everyone to see. By Thursday, word had spread. The little bench was never empty. Kids sat there flipping through picture books while parents stood nearby, whispering about how ridiculous this is. Teenagers began dropping off worn copies of manga and fantasy novels. Someone even donated a set of and then came the chore. Dozens of children, led by Maditha girl who had left Emily the heartfelt note, began decorating the sidewalk around the library. They drew book characters, rainbows, and big block letters spelling out, "Let us read. Books, not battles." It wasn't organized, it wasn't coordinated, but it was a protest, loud in its innocence. Gerald Staunton, president of the HOA, was not amused. He arrived on Friday morning in his khakis and HOA polo shirt, clipboard in hand. He scowled at the drawings, photographed the library from 3 different angles, and ignored the small crowd that had gathered nearby. Emily watched from her porch, a quiet defiance in her eyes. "Ms. Dawson," Gerald barked, "you've now incurred $500 in fines. If this structure is not gone by Sunday, the board will pursue formal action." Emily calmly stepped off the porch and stood in front of the bench. "This is a bench, not a structure, and that box is a library, not a problem. It violates HOA guidelines. Your guidelines didn't account for joy," she said. "Maybe it's time to revise them." Gerald sputtered. "You're not the first person to try this kind of stunt. It never ends." Well, Emily tilted her head, but maybe this time it will. That night, she typed up a flyer. "Community Story Night, Saturday, 7 p.m., at the library. Bring a chair, bring a story. Let's prove what this space really means." She printed 50 copies and taped them to mailboxes, fences, and bulletin boards across Crestview Pines. She posted the invitation on the neighborhood Facebook group with the caption, "The HOA says my library has no value. I think otherwise. Let's prove it." Saturday came quickly, and with it, so did the people. At 6:30 p.m., the first families began to arrive, folding chairs in hand, thermoses of cocoa, trays of cookies. Emily strung fairy lights along her porch railing and set up a small speaker to play soft instrumental music. By 7 p.m., nearly 40 neighbors had gathered. Children sat cross-legged on blankets, couples leaned on each other, and even a few elderly residents brought their walkers to find a place in the back. Emily stepped up to the porch and cleared her throat. "I didn't expect this," she began, her voice shaky but sincere. "I only wanted to share a few books, but I guess what I really shared was a spark. Thank you for being here." Then she opened her notebook and read the first story, a short, heartwarming tale she'd written herself about a lonely girl, a lost library, and a community that refused to let either disappear. When she finished, the audience clapped, and then the stories kept coming. Her father read a bedtime favorite. A shy middle schooler shared her original poem. An elderly veteran recited a piece from memory. Even Maddie stepped forward, clutching a wrinkled piece of paper, and read a story she had written about a magical book tree. There were laughs, tears, applause, connection, and standing in the shadows across the street, uninvited, arms crossed, was Gerald Stanton. The next morning, Emily found another letter taped to her door. This one wasn't printed, it was handwritten. "I still don't agree with how you went about it, but last night was ... moving. My wife cried. I did too, though I'll deny it if asked. I won't fight this anymore. I'll ask the board to reconsider. G. Stanton." Emily stared at the letter for a long time. Then she smiled. Not because the battle was over, but because she'd just won something bigger than any argument. She'd reminded a neighborhood how to be human. By the following Monday, Crestview Pines was humming with quiet tension. The little free library still stood proudly at the edge of Emily Dawson's yard, now flanked by 2 chalkboard signs, reading, "Story Night Returns. Friday 7 p.m. Books build bridges." The bench had been freshly sanded and sealed, and someone had even planted daffodils along its base. The kids' chalk art now extended nearly 2 blocks, with colorful quotes like "Reading is freedom," and "My favorite book lives here." And on the HOA's end, things were getting complicated. At 6:00 p.m. sharp, the HOA board convened inside their usual meeting spot, the bland, beige conference room of the Crestview Pines Community Center. 5 board members took their seats behind folding tables. Gerald Stanton sat at the head, stiff-backed and stern, a legal binder open before him. Next to him, visibly uncomfortable, was Denise Caldwell, the board's treasurer and a longtime resident. Across from her was Howard Ellis, the most neutral board member, calm, analytical, fond of bylaws. Beside him were 2 newer members, Bethany Meyer, a bubbly schoolteacher, and Raj Singh, a data analyst who'd joined the board to understand neighborhood politics. A community vote was on the agenda. Item number 3, motion to enforce removal of unauthorized library box. Lot number 114. Gerald wasted no time. Let's be clear. The library is a violation of HOA guidelines. Section 3.9 is not ambiguous. We've sent multiple warnings and incurred over $500 in fines. And now she's encouraging public gatherings, he added. Unauthorized events. Without permits. We're opening ourselves up to liability. Denise raised an eyebrow. You mean the story night with cocoa and poetry? Call it what you want, Gerald snapped. It's an unsanctioned use of common areas. Bethany leaned forward. But it's not on our property, Gerald. It's on her lawn. It affects the aesthetics of the neighborhood. Raj cleared his throat. Actually, based on community feedback and I've been tracking the social media posts, this library is overwhelmingly seen as a positive aesthetic. Over 83% of posts reference it as charming, friendly, or inspiring. Gerald scoffed. My third grade class is writing short stories to read next week, Bethany added. It's the first time I've seen them excited about books in months. Gerald slammed his binder shut. We are not a literary commune. We are a deed-restricted, covenanted development. Howard finally spoke up. Then maybe it's time to revise the covenants. A long silence filled the room. Meanwhile, across the neighborhood, Emily was nervously sipping tea on her porch. She had no idea what was happening in that boardroom, but she knew it would decide everything. Behind her, the library door creaked open as a small hand reached in. It was Maddie again. I brought something, the girl whispered. She held out a tiny book she'd made by stapling pages together. On the cover, drawn in crayon, the girl who saved the stories. Emily's eyes filled with tears. Can I put it in your library? Maddie asked. It already belongs here, Emily said. Back in the boardroom, a vote was being called. Gerald stood and straightened his posture. Motion on the table. Enforce full removal of unauthorized library box, with continued fines until compliance. All in favor. Only one hand rose his own. All opposed. 3 hands went up immediately. Dennis, Bethany, and Raj. Howard paused, then slowly raised his hand as well. Motion fails, he said flatly. 4-1. Gerald stared at them, betrayed. You're setting a dangerous precedent, he said coldly. If we allow this, we open the door to chaos. Garden statues, flags, personalized signs. Where does it end? Denise smiled, hopefully with neighbors smiling at each other more. Word of the vote spread like wildfire. By morning, Emily's inbox was full of messages from residents. Congrats. Thank you for standing strong. We owe you a story. The HOA officially dropped all fines. The violation was dismissed. But the best part, Gerald grudgingly, bitterly signed a revised policy allowing decorative and literary installations of public benefit as long as they are maintained, safe, and Crestview Pines now had something it had never had before, a neighborhood library zone. The next Friday, more than 60 neighbors gathered for story night. This time, Emily didn't read first. She invited Maddie to open. The little girl held up her stapled book and read. Once there was a mean rule that hated stories, but a brave lady said nitrogen monoxide. And because she did, 1,000 stories grew from her front yard. The crowd erupted into applause. Emily looked around and saw the smiles, the warmth, the joy, and even Gerald standing at the edge, arms crossed. But listening, the little library that once nearly got torn down now stood as the most beloved landmark in Crestview Pines. It wasn't just a box anymore. It was a bench, a chalk-dusted sidewalk, a weekend event. It was laughter under fairy lights. It was bedtime books, poetry slams, and the sound of pages flipping as neighbors connected in ways they'd never imagined. But Emily Dawson didn't know her fight had caught the attention of someone beyond the neighborhood gates. Not until the email arrived. Subject: Partnership Inquiry. The Tiny Words Project. Hi Emily, my name is Kendra Park. I'm the director of the Tiny Words Project, a non-profit organization that helps communities build free libraries and public literary spaces. We recently heard about your story through a neighborhood blog and we're inspired. We'd love to partner with you to replicate your model in other HOA-regulated neighborhoods. Would you be open to a call? Warmly, Kendra. Emily blinked at the email, read it again, and then again. It was real. Her small, peaceful protest had become a model. She could help others build the same thing, not just in Crestview Pines but everywhere. A week later, Kendra flew in. She was young, enthusiastic, and deeply passionate about public access to stories. They met at the now-famous bench outside Emily's library. You've done something powerful, Kendra said. You didn't just build a box of books. You built community where there was once control. Emily smiled. Honestly, I just didn't want to take away something the kids loved. That's the best reason, Kendra said. They discussed plans to start pilot library yards in 3 other HOA neighborhoods. Kendra's nonprofit would provide materials and legal guidance. Emily would be the face of the movement. There was just one thing. We'll need press, Kendra said. A launch event, maybe a small documentary. Are you okay being on camera? Emily hesitated. She never liked being in the spotlight. She preferred the stories to speak for themselves. But this wasn't just about her anymore. That Friday, a film crew arrived. They captured footage of story night, interviewed kids and parents, and even managed to get a short clip of Gerald Stanton saying, "I admit I was overly firm, but I respect what's happened here." The documentary would be short, just 8 minutes, but Kendra said it would be pitched to PBS and several community media outlets. Emily still couldn't believe it, but not everyone was thrilled. Two newer HOA board members who had been quiet until now, Mr. Landers and Ms. Kelly, voiced concerns at the next meeting. "This is turning our neighborhood into a media circus," Landers said. "We didn't sign up to be a pilot program. If Emily's wrong once, or someone trips on that bench, it'll be our liability," Kelly added. Gerald didn't jump to Emily's defense. Not anymore. He'd gone back to neutrality, no longer trying to tear her down, but no longer lifting her up either. That's when the next challenge came. The HOA received an anonymous complaint that Emily's library gatherings had grown too large and were creating parking issues and noise disturbances. The board scheduled a review meeting and warned Emily they might reclassify story nights as unapproved commercial events. Emily was stunned. "I don't charge money. I don't sell anything. These are neighbors reading to neighbors." Still, Raj told her privately, the board's under pressure. It's not about books anymore, it's about the attention. The night before the hearing, Emily sat on her porch, wondering if this was the end. Maybe she had gone too far. Maybe being the face of a movement had painted a target on her back. And then a car pulled up. It was Maddie and her mom. "We saw the flyer," her mom said. "We baked cookies for the hearing." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Flyer? You didn't make it." The woman smiled. "You might want to check the library." Emily walked to the box and opened the door. Inside was a stack of flyers that read,